So today we're going to be discussing episode 3 of volume 2 of Unsolved Mysteries. I don't really know how I feel too much about this episode. It makes me really mad because things happened that even, regardless of the time it happened in, shouldn't have. But I also don't really know what they're expecting the outcome of this case to be. So I'll get into that. So the case, I just have my notes. And I took these notes a while back, but haven't gotten around to recording the video, so I'm going to probably be reading a good bit of it. So the case starts with 14-year-old Mary Ellen Diener, who was killed on November 14th of 1965 in Mansfield, Ohio. Her and her younger sister went to the local laundromat because their dryer at home had broken, and their mother wasn't really worried about letting them go because their grandmother lived right next door to the laundromat and they could wait at her apartment while they were waiting for their laundry to be finished. Now, they didn't have enough change, and I'm assuming that the change machine in the laundromat was broken because Mary Ellen ended up walking 5 minutes further to another laundromat to get change, but she never came back. Her sister went to her grandmother's place to let her know that Mary Ellen never returned, and her grandmother immediately went out onto the street looking for her. And not too much later, she saw police lights, and she then saw Mary Ellen's body on the ground, and she had been shot. Now, police didn't really have any, there didn't seem to be any witnesses who saw this happen, so police went to all local gun stores to find who bought that specific caliber gun that Mary Ellen had been shot with. And they found from one of the gun stores that one of those guns was bought by a man named Lester Eubanks. There was a witness who did put Lester Eubanks in the area that night, but didn't specifically see him do anything to Mary Ellen. Lester himself grew up in Mansfield. He was a young, good-looking guy. He was actually very well liked. He was a bit of a smooth talker. I don't think anyone really had any problems with him. But he would have been, by today's standards, he was considered a sexual predator. However, I don't think the general public knew that about him. He had been arrested twice for sexual offenses with minors, and he was currently out on bond for attempted rape. So he was known with police. So police arrested him and questioned him about this, and he eventually did confess to killing Mary Ellen. He said that he saw her walk past and that he grabbed her, pulled her behind a house, and that she started to scream, so he shot her twice. Now, after this, he left the scene, went back to his apartment. He was planning to go out dancing that night, so he went back to his apartment to get ready to go out, which, I mean, how are you not considered a psychopath if you do that? If you feel So he was convicted of killing her in 1966, and he was sentenced to death row. However, Ohio abolished the death penalty in 1972, and his sentence was then commuted to life in prison. And this is kind of where it all went wrong. So he had been due to be executed 3 times in those 6 years, but it had been pushed back 3 times. So he actually got very lucky that that he hadn't been executed yet, and that at that stage they commuted the death penalty or abolished the death penalty. He spent most of his time in prison painting. He was a very good painter. And like I said, he was a very smooth talker, and he kind of easily, at least it's believed, that he easily won the guards over. They allowed him to enroll in an honors program that prepared prisoners for a life outside of prison. Now, normally he would not qualify for something like that because he was a known sexual predator. He killed a minor, and he was convicted to life in prison. Like, this was to prepare prisoners for life after prison. So someone who was convicted to life in prison should not have been part of this program. But the guards apparently really liked him and didn't. On the one hand, I don't know if they knew what he was in for, and they just assumed that he was allowed to be in this program. On the other hand, I think guards usually tend to know, and so if they knew what he was in for, then I don't get why they allowed him to be in this program, but they did. So under this program, they allowed prisoners to go outside. A lot of times it was like to drive trucks from one prison to another prison, or to run some errands with the guards. He, in prison, also took part in several art shows, and he actually won some awards with some of his paintings. And then in December of 1973, the prisoners in the honors program were allowed to go on a Christmas shopping trip to buy presents for their loved ones. I mean, the actual stupidity of the trip aside, what money are they buying these presents from, and when are they? I mean, I just don't really get it. Yeah, it can be a nice gesture, but you lose a lot of perks when you're in prison, like buying presents for your family or friends. I just find that such a weird reason to let them out. Now, they went to a mall, and they were all dressed as civilians because they didn't want the general public to know that these were prisoners. But they didn't have to stay in a group, and they didn't have guards with them. They were allowed to walk around the mall by themselves for 3 hours, and then they were all supposed to meet up again and reconvene. And of course, Lester ran away. Now, here's my thought on this, okay? If you are a petty criminal, or even a slightly bigger criminal, but you have like 2 years left to go or 5 years left to go, then I can understand. Actually, I can't understand, but I can somewhat get that they do this, because I don't think you would risk escaping and being caught and adding way more years to your sentence. But if your life in prison, why wouldn't you run away? Like, there is no reason for you to go back, because if you escape and they catch you, what are they gonna do? Add more years onto your sentence. You're already spending life in prison. So I do not understand whether it was an administrative mistake that they allowed him in this program, or that they actually knew what he was in for and allowed him anyway. I just don't get it. Now, they think that it was most likely a prepared escape and that he had help, because they think that someone was waiting for him with a car and drove So a nationwide arrest warrant was put out, but there was nothing known about his whereabouts for over 20 years. Actually, exactly 20 years, because in December of 1993, a detective who worked on this case 20 years ago decided to go into the system and check if any updated warrants had been sent out, like whether he had been arrested, and put into the system, and he had been caught. And he found that the arrest warrant was not in the system. So in 1973, when the arrest warrant was issued, it actually wasn't. So if he had driven across the country and ran into police checkpoints, police would never have caught him, because they didn't know that he was a Brit, that he was that he had escaped. Like, there was no arrest warrant out for him, so police wouldn't have known that he was someone they had to look out for. They believe that this was a clerical error, but I have my opinions on that. They did put him on the TV show America's Most Wanted. Now, on the night of the show, a woman called saying that she ran around with him in LA for a few years in the 70s, and that he was living with a woman named Eubanks, who was his cousin's widow. So police went to her house. She cooperated. She said that he did live with her for a couple of years, but he didn't live there anymore. She was actually kind of afraid of him and tricked him into moving out not that much longer. Like not that much later after he moved in. Oh my god, I can't talk. He didn't live with her for that long. Now, this was all in California, so she said that he took a bus to visit her in California, and that on the way there, when he was already in California, the bus got pulled over by police, and that he thought, well, this is it. They're here, they're gonna arrest me and send me back, but that they were actually just looking for illegal fruit, and that none of them even bat an eyelid at him, and that's how he knew that they weren't looking for him and that he could get away with anything. He did change his name to Victor Young, and they found that Victor Young worked at a mattress factory until the mid-80s. It wasn't until 2003 that police went over to visit Lester's father and interviewed him. He was a retired minister who actually regularly visited jail to help or to guide convicts. It seemed to me when they interviewed his father that he felt like, so the interviewer said to him, do you think justice was served in this case? And his father essentially said, well, nothing is going to bring that girl back. But I firmly believe that people change, that people are not the same person they were 20 years ago, which would highly indicate that he knew where his son was, that he was in contact with his son. And he said that that was all he was going to say about Lester. So they did trace his phone records, because he got a witness said that she was visiting his Lester's father once, and he got a phone call from Alabama, and he said, oh, it was my son. So police checked the phone records and actually found that several calls were made from his phone to a youth detention center in Alabama. Now, they went to this detention center to investigate, and a man matching Lester's description did work there for quite a while, but he had quit a few months prior. And that is really most of what there is. So the fact that he quit a few months before police were onto him, I wonder. I have some serious questions about the involvement of police in this, and whether he wasn't actually helped from the inside. First of all, he got into this program that he had no business being in, and they let him walk around a mall on his own, dressed as a civilian for 3 hours. A man who is sentenced to life in prison. Like, not condoning this, but I would probably run away too. I mean, why wouldn't you try? You're stuck in prison for life. They're giving you all this freedom. So, that I already find sketchy. Then the fact that the arrest warrant was not issued when it should have been and was a clerical error. I wonder if that was not done on purpose. And then I also feel like he always seems to be staying ahead of police a little bit. Like, he had stopped working in that youth detention center a few months before police started interviewing his father, so I wonder if no one on the inside let him know that police were coming after him. I don't know. I mean, I don't know why someone would help him at the time. Maybe because, like I said, he was a smooth talker. Maybe he had some money and paid them. I don't know why someone would still help him 20 years later. Or in this case, actually, 2003 would have been, oh gosh, I can't even count. 30 years later. Yeah, 30 years later. I don't know why someone would still be helping him then, but I have to question it because he got away with this. Essentially, he spent 7 years in jail for killing a 14-year-old girl when he was on death row, and then eventually got life in prison, and he got away with it. And that, I think, for me, is the biggest part of this case. I don't know what they're really hoping to accomplish anymore, because as far as I know, he is now in his 70s, and I think actually in his late 70s, so police firmly believe he's still alive. They say that they have reason to believe he's still alive and that they have, like, proof of that. I don't know what that is, but I don't know what they're trying to accomplish by this. It makes me mad that this man lived 40 years of his life free. And that Mary Ellen didn't get a chance. But even if they find him and arrest him now, is that really going to make her family feel better? I don't know. The most he'll spend in jail is maybe another 5 years. I mean, if you go to jail at your late 70s, I don't think you're going to survive for very long. And even if he were to spend another 10 years in there, it doesn't make up for the 40 years that he lived free. So I don't think that justice is ever going to be served for this girl. I just don't believe that. I mean, it doesn't look like he did anything else. In those years, he was never arrested. I don't think that he ever did anything like this anymore in those 40 years, but who knows? But now in his late 70s, I mean, I just don't know what purpose it serves anymore. I do think it might bring her family a little bit of peace knowing that he was ultimately caught and is back in jail, but I just don't think it'll ever feel like justice. I don't think for me it would ever feel like justice was served because he got to live most of his life as a free man. After doing something really horrible. So